Hi book lovers, I thought I'd take you through a spread of I Heart the World today, taking a peek at how a spread is constructed. I often talk about this kind of thing like on my podcast or just chatting to people, but to actually show you I thought would be a really cool thing. So what I've done is I'm going to record my screen here, and I'm right now in Adobe Illustrator, which is where I constructed the spreads for I Heart the World. And I've got a spread called Our Sky, and it just covers the various bits and bobs that happen all the way up in our vast atmosphere. And so I wanted to give a real sense of space, and I did that firstly by creating this sort of, reflection of Earth in this large circle, and by representing the various layers of the atmosphere through these opaque circles here and these dotted lines. But let me just take you to the various layers. So you'll see over here I have a text layer, which of course is on top, a separate page numbers layer because they need to be on their own, a section for illustrations. I've also got a center line that you can't actually really see here because there's actually a divide between the two pages anyway, colour-wise. And then the background, which features all of this, the larger elements of the background that I don't really fiddle around with once I get them in place. So let me just make all of those other layers invisible, and I'll just take you to the background layer and show you what I've done here. So you can see here that I've done a circle representing the Earth, and this green circle here is actually a transparent overlay of green. If I move that, you'll see that underneath I have another circle with a clipping mask. If I open that actual clipping mask section, you'll see that this is the hand-painted green sort of lawn that I did ages ago. I did a bunch of different hand-rendered backgrounds that I then imported into my Mac and I use as texture, and and backgrounds like this, and that's just a JPEG, and then it has an actual circle. Oh, it's not showing it. It has a circle over the top, and I've just clipped that circle out with a clipping mask, and then I've overlaid that green circle with the little dotted line, as you can see there. So that gives this sort of shape of the Earth, or an impression of the Earth. Then here I have a bunch of circles that are just white with a dotted line outline, and they are of various opacities. So there's several of those. You can see here if I move them. See that? And they are overlaying to give that sort of look I was after. You'll also notice I've done a few circles of dotted lines, but I've broken them because if I make this text layer visible, you will see that they sit between those lines there, those two sections, those Kármán line and the ozone layer. Let's just get rid of that. Also this background here. So again, I have these two hand printed, let me just bring them to the front, two hand printed, or actually these were just painted on watercolour paper, and I've scanned them in and I have pasted them in, and I've also made this one, the opacity, actually I've made it brighter so it sort of looks, it was actually like this one when I first created it, but then I've made it really high exposure, so it's just a different sort of look, and I actually like how those two different spreads, different pages have a slightly different look. And if I move them to the back again, you can see how they have a slightly different look. And that's because the two sections have different things happening on them, and I wanted this section here to be a little darker because I have, sorry, I'm going raspy again, because I have satellites, and I'll just show you the picture of those. I have satellites and this shuttle and Sputnik there, so I wanted that side to be a little bit darker. Also, over these hand-printed images, I have several opaque layers, and these are of varying colour. So if I just select them all now and move them, you can see what a difference they make to the background. Move them this way. See there? So they make quite a difference. I also have at the very top a scattering of stars, and this is an actual brush that you can use. So you can see over here that I have these various brushes, and I can actually change that. If I just click on this, I can actually change how they appear. And then down the bottom, I have a couple of swirls that represent the wind, because the images here are for wind farms. And I have the sun. This is again just several, goodness, my voice. This is just several circles of varying opacity. And if I go into them, you can see here, they've got various opacity, and they just give a lovely look as though the sun is shining, but in a graphic design way. All right, so that's the background. The next layer is the illustrations. Let's make them visible. And you can see I've placed them, including these little bubbles that have text in them, and this bubble here that also has text. So I've placed them around the spread, and then the text, of course, fits. Let's have a look at the text here. Fits around those. I can actually also show you how I moved things around. So with this illustration layer, you can see all of these illustrations are on the pink illustration layer here. So I can easily move and resize these to fit the space. And in fact, for this version of the book, I'm doing a new smaller format version for Kmart, which is exciting. I actually have just moved things slightly and enlarged things and made certain things smaller, because the smaller format means the text will be smaller, of course, to fit the spread, and the labelling will be smaller and all that kind of thing. So I can shift and change those around. And then, of course, the page numbers, if we make them visible, they are in the same spot on each spread. So as I go through each of these larger format spreads and make them smaller, I can just cut and paste the page numbers so that they sit in exactly the same position for each spread. Gosh, sorry, I know my voice must be driving you nuts. Okay, so that's how the different layers are created. I also wanted to show you this little rainbow I made ages ago. I did have this here at one stage, but I decided to remove it. It's easy to clutter spreads and make things really big and just try to fill the space with too much, but we have to remember that we need breathing space when we're creating spreads. The textured backgrounds here are really beautiful, and it's great for them to be able to shine through as well. And we don't want to overwhelm the eye. You'll see that I've grouped things in certain sections here, so these birds here are grouped. This section here has another grouping. We have another one draped across the top here, a small grouping over here, another one along the bottom here, and then these ones along the top that sort of sit in the darker night sky. So it's important to have that lovely balance. You'll also notice that I've crossed over the gutter with some of these images, but they are parts of the illustration that we can kind of lose. The book doesn't have a deep gutter. The binding allows the pages to lay quite flat, so we don't lose much here anyway. But with this helicopter and with some of the other images that I've put across the gutter for this book, I have actually lengthened them. So I've made them a little bit longer, like that, without distorting the image, so that there's actually a little bit more space for the gutter. Some images I've even inserted a section. For example, I might have cut out this section here and split the image and added it to the middle. So almost like those tables you get where you can have an insert to make the table longer, just so the image isn't too compromised when it's across the gutter. Okay, I think that's it. And yeah, so I might do a couple more of these so you can just see the different processes and the different books that I work on. But this is Our Sky in I Heart the World. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me know. Ciao.